excited to host tonight's event with Syed Jones. Presenting his new book, Alive at the End of the World. He'll be talking with Adam Falkner, so you're in for an excellent evening. Before I turn things over to them, just a couple of quick housekeeping things. We are recording this evening. Masks are to be worn by everyone in the house all evening. Signed books are available for sale at the register, and if you ordered a pre-order online or on Eventbrite, they will be right up there as well. Finally, please silence or turn off your phones. Our interviewer for this evening is Adam Falkner. Dr. Adam Falkner, him is a poet and musician, educator, and race and equity strategist. His work focuses on intersectional themes of race, gender, queer life, and social justice education. He is the author of The Willies, which is signed and available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore, and Adoption, and his writing has been featured on programming for HBO, in The Guardian, The New York Times, and elsewhere. He will be speaking with our featured author, Saeed Jones. Yeah, yeah. All of the applause, always. Let's do it. Yes. Jones was born in Memphis, Tennessee, and grew up in Louisville, Texas. His work has appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, and GQ, and he has been featured on public radio programs including NPR's Fresh Air, Pop Culture Happy Hour, It's Been a Minute with Sam Sanders, and All Things Considered. He lives in Columbus, Ohio, with his dog Caesar, who's very online. I follow him too. In his new book, Alive at the End of the World, Jones explores the public and private betrayals of life as we know it. Pierced by grief and charged with history, these haunted poems, glinting with laughter, strip away American artifice in order to reveal the intimate grief of a mourning son and the collective grief bearing down on all of us, and seek ways to love and survive through America's existential threats. So I think you're in for something special this evening. Saeed will be offering readings from the book for you, and then Adam will hop on stage and join him in conversation. And if you have questions, you'll have a chance for that at the end. So please join me in welcoming to the stage, Syed Jones.
Hey, thank you. Jessica, it's good to see you. It's good to be back. I have been doing, Jesus, I need to learn how to use a mic in time for a book event. I've been doing events and readings at this bookstore location for over a decade now. Poetry, still at it. So, I think as we're still, hey, Marlon, hi. The bitchiest person in my group text. We're gonna talk later. You are a mess. It's good to see you. We're turning to places. We're still having firsts. We're still having reunions, right? I think this just will be the rest of our lives. And so, I wanted to acknowledge, what it meant to be here doing readings before I had a book, and then I had a chapbook, and then a first book, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so, and then I'm going to be talking with Adam Falkner, my good friend. I saw the DMs. I get it. You think he's a twink. He's not a twink. We'll talk about this. But no, he's one of my good literary friends. We've known each other for a decade. Life sneaks up on you. All of a sudden, you're like, damn, we've known each other for a long time. But I'm excited, and because I'm comfortable in this space, and I've done some events, I'm going to read poems I actually want to read. Often I do the Tina Turner Proud Mary, and I'm like, nah, I don't get any of that. So let's start with the dead, because we're going to talk a lot about grief tonight. I think so much of Alive at the End of the World, this phenomenon that we're living through is that we're grieving so many facets. It's not just people. I mean, we're grieving a lot of loved ones and people, but we're also grieving understandings, systems, structures, rituals that used to serve us. And the thing is, I thought a lot about like the dead, what's left behind. We start talking about past tense and we move on as we're doing our work. But like, how would you feel about that? So this is a poem in the voice of a zombie. A memory. When they finished burying me, what was left of me sent up a demand, a hand blooming in the fresh dirt. When I'm back, I want a body like a slash of lightning. If they heard me, I couldn't hear their answers. But silence has never stopped me from praying. Alive, how many nights did I spend knelt between the knees of gods and men, begging for rain, rent, and reasons to remain? A body like the sky seeking justice. A body like light reaching right down into the field where you thought you could hide from me. They've taken their bald rose stems and black umbrellas home now. They cook for one another and pretend every bite isn't salted with ash. They sleep, if they sleep, and hold themselves tight as cadavers. They dream of dirt, and dirt renames me memory. But history has never stopped me from praying. It's a book about the end of the world. It's just gonna get real fast. So, if you don't want to this poem about systemic failure was fucking lit. You know what I mean? It's okay. Hi, Arslan. Where are you? Hi. Hello. Sexiest Pakistani man I know. He's so fun. I think he's single. Are you still single? Okay. All right. You can get more of the poems tonight. Yeah. One of the facets of our common living experience that I wanted to honor was what I think of as the violence of repetition. I'm a kid of the 90s, and I think a lot of, I'm looking at, okay, where a lot of us are kids of the 90s, and we were spoon-fed ideas about the apocalypse, where it was like, remember those Second Coming movie books? They were probably movies, but they were books when I was in high school, or, Deep Impact, Independence Day, Armageddon, the end of the world is a one-time event, and a group of white people that are all very thin will rally together, and then there will be a montage where we're all, Times Square. You know what I'm talking about? That's what it, but that's not what it feels like. That's not what it is. What our experience is are apocalyptic events, whether it is Supreme Court decisions, acts of state police violence, right? Violence against trans youth, kids, things that should just stop us in our track. They're just happening like this. You're like, a shooting just happened. You're like, which shooting? Where? It's just, you can't even give. There have been 2 shootings in Uvalde, Texas in the last month. How do you deal with that? And so I wanted to acknowledge that by having several poems in the book with the same title. Because you can't keep up. You're like, which apocalypse? I usually read one of them about mass shootings, but I think you know about mass shootings. So this is a poem I think of as the sequel to Prelude to Bruise, if you read that book. If you ever want to know how Boy's doing, not well, bitch. Hi, Brian. You're such a wonderful writer. It's good to see you. No, he's not doing well. Brian's doing well. You doing well? Brian's doing well. Boy isn't, if you read Prelude to Bruise. So this is him later in life. It'll be the most fun evening of grief you've ever had. That is what I can promise you. Alive at the end of the world. The world ends and I make a dress out of the names I live to inflict on myself. Painful to put the dress on. Even more painful to take it off. I banish the dress to my closet as long as my body can bear. The world ends again, so I drag the dress out, bandage myself back into the truth of beauty. A bejeweled bodice of screams, tight waist of wasted bullets. The train leaves bruises everywhere I walk. Neighbors call me a disaster when the world ends. This is what it means to be a man in pain, naked, in the middle of the street. Have you met men? I'm a gay man, so I'm aware of how confusing this is. They're terrible. Kind of bad. And with this book, yeah, I mean, hey, you've been there. You saw what we saw. No, so, in so much of this book where I'm thinking about how we are navigating the experience of trying to process, acknowledge, and maybe heal from personal griefs while besieged by the collective systemic griefs and there's just so much. It's like it's enough to deal with our own shit, but of course other things are bearing down on us too. And so as I was honing in on where are the opportunities in poems to kind of illuminate that crucible, I was like, oh, men, because the thing about patriarchy is that to suffer is human, but when men suffer, we make it other people's problems. And I was like, oh, there we go. And I'm going to sip some water. Welcome, one night only. And I never really liked Robert Hayden's Those Winter Sundays. What did I know? I don't know. I was like, sounds like it's not the kids' problems. I mean, the offices are austere and lonely. It sounds like something you should deal with. So this is another alive at the end of the world, where I wanted to bring all of that literally into a house. Because that's the thing, whether, it's like astrology, Sagittarius, Taurus moon, Libra rising, or if you are doomed to believe in some kind of organized religion, these things become organizing structures. And whether that is patriarchy, white supremacy, the fact that you are attracted to men, it becomes an architecture that you live inside of. That was actually very funny. That was really good. Alive at the end of the world. The end of the world loved us like a father who bragged about the broken roof he kept overhead whenever we'd complain about the night air watching us sleep, or whenever we'd wince at his reach. The end of the world would shout, I made that roof. What have you made? Nothing but tears. Nothing but waste. Chairs and coffee mugs came at us like asteroids. We're sorry, we'd lie. No one loves us like you love us. We'd hiss from hiding places we treated like siblings. Crying alone in the kitchen he had just ruined, the end of the world would scream, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. As if a man has to die to haunt his children. As if we didn't already daydream about the wood grain of his coffin, the threadbare suit we couldn't wait to see his body stuffed into. The hymns we'd stutter through, off-key, on purpose, knowing damn well that the end of the world's ghost was mean as spit and already on its way. Yeah, fuck that nigga. I know Adam wants to talk about humor. So let's get, okay, you ready? No, you're not, but we're going anyway. At some point I will figure out how to work this mic situation. Last summer, I'm halfway into writing this book, and obviously I'm thinking about personal grief. My mother, Saeed Jones, raised me as a single parent, and she died of heart disease a decade ago on the night before Mother's Day. And then a decade after her death, I find myself in the middle of a global pandemic that is pointedly impacting the health of Black women like her. She lives in the state of Georgia. She worked as a gate agent at an airport. And I was like, oh, she would have died now. What does it mean to miss her? And then you want her here for this? And so I think I'll read a poem that makes me very stressed out. I will acknowledge that. It's on its side in the book. So, I'll just say when you're reading the book and you're like, what the fuck? Like, that's the point. I want you to feel like, what the fuck? Because that's how I feel. The title is Saeed How dare you make your mother into a prelude? And then night neons itself inside me, and I begin missing you in loud, new ways. The sky burns itself bright, then bruises black. Things fall from the sky, and those things might be water, but could just as well be boys, or bombs, or billionaires, or birds. Honestly, between your death and me, it doesn't matter. Or I don't know, he gets it. Or I wasn't looking. Or I couldn't see because I've made a home out of how much I miss you, and there's no one here to tell me I should leave. Alone and night neon, I write, read, drink, drug, grieve, and all America keeps teaching me is that there are so many ways to die in America, which frankly is quite confusing. Because this country killed you a decade ago, and I'm still writing, reading, drinking, drugging, grieving, binging, blacking out in the cozy, claustrophobic home I've made out of how very, very much I miss you. And the sky keeps throwing down consequences and corrections and histories and nations. I mean, come on. Who can blame me for not wanting to go back outside? You? A whole decade ghosted? Grounded and ground down into unreliable memories, dollar word metaphors? No, not you. Mother as mortar and pestle. Mother as son mangling meaning out of his mother's misfortune. Mother as second draft, sorry. But it's awfully true. You are prelude. And your progeny, loud and unrelenting in your epilogue, somehow has to live on as your last sentence, uncompleted. And then we write the book back. Thank you. But of course, if you've lost anyone you know about, maybe life gets back to functioning, but it's not back to what it was. And so the next page, instead of a poem, it's the reverse. So there's a footnote. Saeed wonders if the poem you just read would have been better served by a different title. So then I tried to work out some titles. Because I was like, did you just, bitch, what the fuck did you? Okay. I'll give you something to cry about. Or after Carol Sweet Jones. Or after redacted for the sake of the subject's privacy. Or a decade into grief, Saeed gets lost in the fog between candor and shamelessness. Or if you cry hard enough, any grief can be the end of the world. Or Saeed wonders if he or his mother is the protagonist. Or alive at the end of the world. Or did I just trick myself into writing another memoir? Or in this America, how can I call myself a good son and wish my mother, a black woman, was still here? That's the joke. Okay, thank you. So I'm interested in, obviously I have a hard-earned sense of humor. And so I want to read, and then I'm going to talk to Adam. It's going to be, who knows what's about. We might make out. Not my time. He's used to this. It's fine. He's like absolutely used that like love is like inflicted, not bestowed. But as I was like halfway into the experience of writing this book, and obviously 10 years, like I know grief pretty well. Like it's like friends with benefits at this point. And so I'm thinking about it. And then last May, the comedian Paul Mooney died, and I loved Paul Mooney's work. One of my favorite Paul Mooney jokes. He's like, white men can't jump. White men can't jump. Don't need to. They own the team. And he was one of Richard Pryor's longtime collaborators and best friends. I just like fascinating. I think he might have had a touch of it, just a touch. I'm saying game recognized game. And but then he died, and I was overwhelmed by how sad I was. And it was just like any experience with grief, like you think and instead it's like a dam inside you opens up, and you're like, oh, I thought it was a lake of grief, and it's like, no, bitch, it's an ocean. It is an ocean. There's a Sargasso Sea right there. It's like so big. So I'm gonna read some poems inspired by that experience, and then we'll chat, then we'll vibe. White people, get ready. I'm giving you a whole poem to prepare yourselves. Did you know? Okay. All I gotta do is stay black and die. Paul Mooney's heart stopped this morning in Oakland, and the night Whitney Houston died, the national anthem shot itself in the throat. I fell asleep watching Aretha's funeral, and when I woke up, she was somehow still dead. Somehow I keep losing people who were never really mine. Diane Carroll died, and I walked into my bedroom closet looking for a mink coat I didn't have and pearl necklaces I will never own because I missed them already. Luther, are there closets in heaven? Little Richard, if you stand in a closet and scream loud enough for white people to steal your sound, is it really a closet? I should have kissed you when I had the chance. I think Cicely Tyson left because she knew how this song was going to end and didn't want to hear it. I think Maya is still somewhere correcting what people call her. I think Toni Morrison always knew. It's not the death that hurts. It's the dying. Okay, white people, that was your warning. So to honor, because I wanted this book in so many ways, and we can talk about it, to be a time, I wanted to work as a book without any context, but also it's a time capsule of the influences and cultural mentors and ancestors that I was looking to make sure I made sense of what the fuck was going on. And so to acknowledge that, I wrote that poem very quickly. I literally tweeted it out. It had a typo in it, very embarrassing. And then I decided to write a sequence of poems about all the people invoked in the poem that appeared throughout the book in the order that it was. I was like, what's going on? But I wanted to acknowledge, it was like out of the loss of Greece, like create abundance, which K.S.A. Lehman talks so much about. So here we go. Richard Pryor, 1975, there was a new show out called Saturday Night Live, and its showrunner, Lorne Michaels, was like, Richard, please, you're incredible. You're at the peak of your career. Please come host. And he was like, sure. I'm going to bring my best friend and collaborator, Paul Mooney, with me, obviously. And it seems like Lauren was like, sure, great. And then privately was like, Lauren, you need to have a job interview. Which, think about how insulting that is. Like you're about to be the best thing that has ever happened to Saturday Night Live, and like you have to endure like an insulting job interview. And for the rest of his life, Paul Mooney in his writings and in stand-up would refer to it, And I think we've all been there. Pick your poison, but that kind of experience, and it does linger. It's a different kind of grief. It haunts you. So this poem is about that, and it's set in 1975. What else do you need to know? All the jokes are and images come from Paul Mooney jokes, except for one about Chevy Chase's dick. I have not seen Chevy Chase's dick. I cannot confirm its color or its length. That's just me. It's just speculation. It's creative writing. But everything else, including the rabbits, comes from Paul Mooney jokes. Okay. It's 1975, and Paul Mooney says nigger 100 times. Every morning. It keeps his teeth white. Isn't that great? That's a great joke. A fucking legend. Know him. It keeps his teeth white as a picket fence wrapped around burned down plantations. White as the suburb 3 suburbs over. White as a family tree with niggers falling out of it. White as rabbits grabbing their purses and running from punchlines. White as Chevy Chase looking at his dick in a funhouse mirror while drinking a nice, dry, white. White as Lucy spitting Babalu back into Ricky's open mouth. White as the Hollywood sign on stolen land. White as crack dreaming of cocaine and good credit scores. White as the kind of test questions you answer so white boys with little white dicks can look at you and whine, you're only here because you're black. You're only here because your boy Richard vouched for you. Anyway, I'm Lorne Michaels. Jesus, Lauren, chill the fuck out. I'm Lorne Michaels. I guess we are in this city. I'm the white man who decides what's funny. Have a seat, Mr. Mooney. This is a job interview. How many white men have you lied to this morning? How many of their wives are you going to fuck tonight? It's Saturday and we like to keep it all the way live. That's why I ask these questions. I need to know what kind of niggers we're working with here. Have you ever dreamed of going to the White House? Would you want to go if I took you? I'm the kind of white man who does shit like that. The kind of white man who opens doors and uses other people's shoes to keep those doors open. Paul? Can I call you Paul? I'm calling you Paul, nigger. Be honest. What's the deal with you and Richard? Do you like each other? Or do you love each other? Or do you want to be each other? I don't trust a nigger who talks to his own shadow, or a shadow who talks back. I don't trust your love, or your shadow, or your jokes, or your smile, especially your smile. Nothing that white can be good. Thank you.
Folks, I'm about to say a statement and then you are going to applaud again. We are incredibly fucking lucky to be living in the time of Saeed Jones.
Oh yeah, look out, man.
Mic on?
They actually work. Look out, okay. Yeah.
Lauren, are you there?
Yeah.
All right, my first question is about Chevy Chase's dick.
Yeah, so the thing about Chevy, like immediately.
Just kidding.
It says dick, it's like it's really thick. No, so what I thought was interesting is that, so Paul endures the interview, of course gets the job. Beyonce, please audition if you want to come sing in my high school talent. You know, like, gets the job. But gets the job, and then he talked about, in addition to everything else, he was like Chevy Chase, because everyone who was smart knew how brilliant he was, you know, and how important he was to Richard Pryor's work. So then he was like, then Chevy Chase chased him around for the whole week, begging him to write a skit for him and Richard Pryor, and that becomes the famous word association skit. So it was out of Lorne Michaels being annoying and insulting, and then this other white man kind of chasing him around while he's trying to do his work. Yeah, yeah. Which, so, the dick move.
Thank you for entertaining that question.
Yeah.
One more time. All right. Syed, I wanna open this conversation we're about to have.
Yes. Was that the prelude?
By asking you. So you said something to me a couple years ago, and I've never forgotten it, which is a weird way to begin a conversation in public with a lot of people.
This one.
We were traveling. You mentioned to me
Oh, okay.
that you were pretty sure you were done writing poems. Which, if you, like I, fell in love with Saeed's work as a poet or through the lens of Prelude to Bruise, that's a deep grief, because of course the drama is all about me, what will I do? I also knew that that was a flag towards something that you were percolating on, and it made me really excited. Because I knew you were going to take a breath and step back to work on expanding. In those handful of years, you've gifted the world a lot of writing. Most recently, of course, the very widely beloved How We Fight for Our Lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can applaud for that. Which is among essays and among other beautiful things you put out in the world, which is to say nothing of what you can do with 140 characters or less.
It's 280 now.
It's 280, that's true. That's how you know I'm right. But I'm interested to know what has expanded or opened in you that has afforded you a return to poems in this way right now.
Like, first of all, we were drunk. And in southern France, like, you know, I also was making you play, like, what was that, the Weeknd song, I Can't Feel My Face? I was making them play it on repeat, like, for hours, and you'd be like, so like, that's the state of mind I was in.
That's the scene, that's the full scene.
All kinds of shit. Now you bring it back. I think every book, this is my third book, I think it rewires my brain. I think I have to have, there has to be a bit of synergy between how I'm living and what I'm writing about. And so I go all in, and at that point, in France, you know, because you were having to endure driving me around, you know, I was several years at that point into writing the memoir. I was deep in it. So, you know, working on a memoir, which is like, to me, like poetry is almost like biology, maybe microbiology, maybe biomes, maybe that level of scale of organisms. And then working on the memoir, I felt it was like world history. It's like astronomy. We're talking about planets. It's just like so big and expansive. And so the occasions, you know, like Paul Mooney says, you know, I say nigger 100 times every morning, it keeps my teeth white, and I'm like, ah, and then I'm like, oh, that's that's the beginning of something. That's a point. Like, whenever that impulse would happen during the years that I was writing How We Fight for Our Lives, I would be like, how can this poem exist in the book? Like, I think there are a bunch of like poems or possible poems hidden in How We Fight for Our Lives. It's kind of like lyric, emotional moments. Often my editor would be like, how do you know, I have no problem like writing really intensely about, obviously, about like what happened to me, but then he would like leave a note like, how did it feel? How do you feel about that? And then I'd be like, poem time. So yeah, I mean, you get so good at doing that it's like true. I mean, I recorded the audiobooks for Alive at the End of the World and Prelude to Bruise, so 8 years apart, this summer in 2 days. And as I was reading Prelude to Bruise and recording it, and I think we did that first, I was in awe. I mean, one, I was like, this is a very good book. It's a little long. I think I would have cut some of the poems out of it. You know, I think you see like a young poet being like, I will never get to publish a book again, so I'm throwing every you know, like I was so terrified that I would never get that opportunity again. So I'm like, you can chill down a little. Let's edit like a little. But as I was like rereading it, and still I'm in awe of the Saeed that wrote Prelude to Bruise. I don't know how I wrote those poems. I'm not that person. I'm just not. And I try. I mean, that's what, like, you know, like the dress poem is an allusion to that. But you see how different it is if you've read Prelude to Bruise. It's just different. I can't go back. And yeah, how did I get back to poetry, which I think you're also asking? Fair? I don't know. I think, I mean, I missed it. I love the occasion of a poem. I love how that feels. I love like the moment that happens, you know, like it was like everyone in the room physically responded to like as if a man has to die to kill his children, you know, and that's within the space of a line. That's incredible, you know, like when you write a prose, you have to write like 20 pages to kind of create that, you know. So I think I missed that, but I also think, in addition to missing it, I think 10 years into grief and then into this, shit just got fucking weird. We're just getting fucking weird, man. And repetitive. It got boring. I was like, I'm not gonna write, you know, like police brutality, gun violence appear in the book, and I write about it in a certain way. And I think it kind of had to exist in poems because it began to feel condescending. Why would I explain the phenomenon of gun violence to you? How dare I? How dare I? You know, you might know better than I do, you know? And so then how could I possibly, as an artist, engage that moment? Where I was like, well, poetry kind of exists like dance. It's like dance, comedy, fucking, laughter. When you've been pushed beyond the parameters of normal discourse, when the normal ways of communicating and engaging no longer serve you, then poetry is there to do something else. And so I just think I got weird enough and shit got weird enough that poetry was going to, like, this could not be an essay collection. You know, it couldn't be a memoir, you know. So yeah.
I see a lot of heads nodding. And also that's to affirm the same themes are always deeply center stage, right? In your work. We've talked about grief, we're talking about centering on queerness and blackness and death and grief are all really prevalent in this book. And there's a real departure here. And you're giggling because you know that it is true.
Yes. It is, yes.
There is a lot of laughter in these poems, right? And that exists as you are grieving multiple apocalypses, going into and emerging on the other side of multiple kinds of grief. you are dancing beautifully and delicately on a kind of joy and playfulness that is new in your work. And very familiar to people who may know you outside of your work. But there is a playfulness and a joy that feels really close to the way that you are digging into the griefs of our time. And I'm wondering if you could reflect on that and share what's coming up for you when you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I miss the sound of my mom's laughter probably more than I miss anything in existence. You know, I would cause a lot of harm if the trade-off was I got to like bring her back and tell her a joke. And so, you know, so it's not that humor, that laughter, that like laughing to keep from crying, or you're crying and laughing at the same. You know, we've been there. We've all been. You know what I'm talking about, right? And you're like, you're laughing, and someone's like, "What's funny?" You're like, "I don't know. I don't really know that you're sobbing." You know, that's really human and prevalent and felt now. So I wanted to honor that. And also, I'm a funny bitch. I am funny. And so, you know, and I say that in that it's an important part of how I perceive myself. If you ask me to sit down and like make a list of qualities that I think make me me, I think my sense of humor, my mischievousness would be on that list. And so then there's a grief when you're writing, and you're 3 books in your career, and you're like, I'm not quite seeing that in the writing. You know, it irritates. Like literally, like there's one joke about a guy's bald spot in Prelude to Bruise. And
that's it.
That's it. And then there's some like sassy lines, and then maybe 2 direct jokes that I realized were jokes as I was writing them in the memoir, and then that's it. You know, but this evening, how many jokes? You know, like I it's such an important part of who I am, and so I think I am delighted to have lived long enough to have learned how to become a better writer, because I think comedy is, and that's why I think maybe that's the thing with Paul Mooney, like I'm invoking all of these other artists, Whitney Houston, Little Richard, Luther Vandross. I just think comedy is really difficult. And particularly like in poetry, I didn't want people to feel like the book stopped and now Syed's just like getting jokes off, you know? So what a wonderful challenge, but also, you know, everything you write is kind of the same thing. And the only thing that I think keeps it interesting is you're finding a new way to come at it. And I think for me, I realized just pragmatically, I was like, laughter has saved my life, certainly over the course of the last few years, but also I've always been a little irritated that my readings are often funnier than the books. Piss me off.
The banter to fill in the poem.
Yeah.
You said your editor often asked you, how do you feel about that?
Oh my God.
And then you knew it was a poem. Can I ask you how you feel about seeing more joy show up in your poems?
Yeah, now I feel, and I'm like, oh, we're good. It's there. It's there. Yeah, I love it. I think, I mean, it's only been a couple of weeks. Thank you for supporting the book. Thank you for coming out tonight. You know, like, we should probably all be learning how to, like, make fires. I don't know. Some of us are going to need guns because they got a lot of them. You know what I mean? Like, there's some shit we need to be doing, but we're here. So thank you. I'm proud. I don't know. I think I did what I set out to do. I really feel that way. I see in people's reactions and what people aren't just like, it's a good book. Like when people say, oh, I love it, when they explain why, they're hitting the notes that I was trying to sing. And that's all you want. And it's just now, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a real crisis of, maybe whether people realize, I mean, you see comedians like Dave Chappelle's dumbass, who, by the way, Paul Mooney did a lot of writing for the Dave Chappelle show. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as Paul Mooney entered the end of his life and was beginning, you know, wasn't able to work anymore, then certainly, you know, the jokes aren't quite hitting anymore. Why is that, Dave? You know, but you see in all of these forms, I think artists suddenly beginning to realize we need to justify taking up people's time, space, and money. Like, you really should be learning how to build a fire. It's wild out there. You know what I mean? They are coming for us, girl. You know what I mean? So then, what could a poem possibly offer? And I'm honored to feel like I can look at this book and I'm like, I think it'll help you wake up the next day.
And let me tell you, everyone in here has a reason to be really fucking soggy and
Soggy. Oh.
and
word.
and despondent.
Yeah.
And
Bitter.
to lay down the arsenal that we know we need close at hand. And the way you deliver joy and playfulness alongside the desire to keep surviving should be, if not all the other reasons that all the very famous publications will tell you to go buy this book, a reason alone to pick this up.
Thank you.
You do mention this larger canon of writers and black performers and voices that you're writing toward and through, and it's often in those poems where there's like a kind of uncorking of this joy and playfulness and side-eyeness and a gentleness. And one of the places that this comes out most ferociously is in the notes section of this book. Can we spend a second on the notes?
Sure, I love the notes.
All right. So there are a few moments in this book where there are multiple selves, as any good Saeed Jones book will unveil. And these notes are perhaps the truest and most cleanest direct line wave to the Syed Jones sitting here. I'm wondering if you could take us to the notes a little bit. And I'm interested in one note in particular, but you can tell us a little bit about what's going on with the notes section first, and then I'll tell you which one I want to hear.
Okay. Well, because I wanted the book, I've been thinking a lot about like what's great about books in particular. Like I love all kinds of media. I've been like brought to tears by TikToks. Like I believe that different media can resonate in meaningful ways, you know, and if you decide to barricade yourself from that possibilities, that's your loss, you know. But then like what's a book? How does it work? And it's like, you know, it's a space, it's an object, and you're in it, you're kind of contained. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's an opportunity to use the form of the book to evoke aspects of this everyday apocalypse we're living through, like the repetition, where it's like alive at the end of the world. You're like, which poem are you talking? You know, like that confusion that's really unsettling and real. And then I thought another example of that is like the unpredictability. Like, of course, we don't know what it's just, you know, who knows what news push notifications we've all gotten, you know, and like maybe Clarence Thomas died. Wouldn't that be awesome? Who knows? Just spitballing. Not like I have a list. And so I liked the idea in the book of the reader being destabilized. So like there's a poem on its side. The epigraph section, which opens the book, you realize is kind of a poem unto itself. It has repetitions in it, and you might go, is that a type, you know, like that, what's going on? And then like the notes, yeah, you think it's gonna be like this dry, like this poem was published, and this, you know, and instead it's pretty wild, and I love that. I love, you know, because that's it. We're not done. We're not done. I mean, you know, it's like, let's talk about reproductive justice. I mean, gosh, they're not satisfied. I was like, you just got everything you want. You just got everything you want. You've been working to this more than I've been alive. These fucking fascists have wanted this court decision, and we were only hungrier, you know? And so like to bring that into the book, it's like you think you're done, Syed's read these poems, you're like, I'm crying, I've made notes of what I want to talk to my therapist about tomorrow. And then you get to the notes section and it's just as crazy.
Can you take us there?
Sure. Are you talking about Little Richard?
I would love to hear Little
Okay.
Richard. Does that feel good for you to read?
Sure.
All right.
And this is just an aside, and this is going to stress everyone out, but when I was in college, one summer, my sophomore year, I happened to run into Little Richard twice in 2 weeks. And he offered to take me into the restroom and give me a blowjob. So I should have kissed you when I had a chance, actually. That's what that's about. But setting that aside, chaos!
Ladies and gentlemen, Syed Jones.
Suffer. Actually, that was my intro story when I started at BuzzFeed in January of 2013. And they would ask you to stand up and tell a story about you. That was the story. And literally, because I was in town for a week, everyone followed me on Twitter immediately. Everyone was like, well, this person is incredible. Like, who is he? I was like, hello, employee number 139. But the reason I've never like written an essay about that is that I just, you know, I just had really complicated grief about Little Richard. He was wronged in like a lot of ways, and I think he was treated like a joke. And that's both about racism and homophobia, right? And it just made me really sad. And so I was like, there's just like never the right time to do this. So this is the note about the poem, and then I'll read the poem.
Sure.
The title is Little Richard Listens to Pat Boone Sing Tutti Frutti. Was inspired by the rage behind Little Richard's iconic screams. In America, one way to suffer a death before you die is to mean so much to so many people for so many different reasons. It's not just that we could hear James Brown's shouts in Little Richard's screams, or see Prince's ass in Little Richard's curves. It's that Bob Dylan wrote in his high school yearbook that his life's ambition was to, quote, join Little Richard. It's that Pat Boone watered down and added bleach to Tutti Frutti, and it was a bigger hit than Little Richard's original version. It's that Pat Boone did it again with Long Tall Sally. It's that because of a shitty contract Little Richard signed, he only made half a cent for every record of Tutti Frutti that sold. It's that for Little Richard, selling more than 500,000 copies of Tutti Frutti amounted to a mere $25,000 in his bank account. It's that when Little Richard said, if Elvis is the king of rock and roll, I'm the queen, he wasn't being cute or sassy. He was correcting the historical record and demanding equity that he never received. In America, one way to suffer a death before you die is for people to applaud you, even as they steal from you. In America, one way to suffer a death before you die is to be an inspiration to white male rock stars. There should be catacombs under the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Wow. Little
Richard alone would account for at least a dozen tombs.
Wow.
Thank you. So where is Little Richard? And if you see, and I mean, it's, go on YouTube, like if you haven't, and even if you have, spend some time. That's the thing about grief and this pain, it's painful to watch, it's uncomfortable, you know, and if you've watched interviews with Little Richard, it's not comfortable, it's unpleasant, you know, and I think we need to sit in that and think about why he's acting that way, you know. Little Richard listens to Pat Boone sing Tutti Frutti. If I could, and I bet I could, hell, I know I could, write a song that killed anyone who tried to wrap their throat around it. I'm writing the first verse right now, riding the rhythm like your mama, straddling the preacher while your daddy looks on, with a mouth full of every moan he can't have. Ain't that what you really want? A stadium full of white people screaming your stage name, and a smashed guitar where your dick used to be? Ain't that what you deserve? God is the only reason I haven't already held you down and spat the hook into your mouth like a poison that will kill us both.
I'm curious about one or two more questions, and then I'd love to open it up for maybe one or two curiosities if folks have them. Think really good and hard and specific and short-windedly about your curiosity if you have.
You feel that PhD, can't you?
Saeed, you've mentioned it a bit, but tell me why it was important for you to write toward and through these voices in this collection.
Yeah, I mean, you see in the book at one point I do kind of literally multiply myself.
Yeah. We can go there.
Because part of what I'm realizing, and it's a fantasy, it's why I love science fiction fantasy, we need more of ourselves. Like who we are physically isn't enough for this shit. Running at full bandwidth over here, baby. You know, wouldn't it be nice if there were two of me to possibly engage this bullshit? And I know y'all feel the same way. You know, 3, 4. You know what I mean? So, okay, you can't do that. Yeah, you know, it's like Peter Dill's trying. Weirdo. So what we can do is go to history. And I think as a black queer person who I do feel is the end of the world, I'm smart, I get it. I'm also overwhelmed. I do think we got some new shit coming at us. I also think there is value in looking to the experience of elders and ancestors who, when you spend time with their histories and stories, will tell you it's always been the apocalypse. find a black person in America at any point in American history, right, who would say it's not the end of the world. It's been the end of the world since my ancestors were brought here, you know? And so I think going into history, going into their experiences with figures I knew about, often in great detail, but I tried, the poems are about moments in their lives I didn't know about actually deeply. It was humbling. I think that's important. It's everything's in balance, you know, and so it's like you need to acknowledge your pain, your panic, and like vent, and then you need to take a breath and go, I'm not the only one who feels this way, and this isn't the first time people like us have felt this way. And I think that series was helpful.
You bring up this question of wishing there were more of you.
For sure. Because you're an army.
Wouldn't that be?
My boyfriend's like,
In all sincerity, there are many of you in this book. There are so many of you that you are referring to the yous in third person.
too much of you, too many of you.
Periodically, right? Throughout. We heard a couple. Saeed, how dare you make a prelude of your mother, right? Or Saeed, there are multiple poems where you're addressing yourself. In fact, there is a series. You shouldn't need a single other reason to escape Greenlight books tonight without this in your hand. But if you need one, there is a series that begins where you come home from a work trip or reading. And you're exhausted, and you show up in your kitchen, and you turn the lights on, and there is you, sitting like that.
I think it's a dead body at first.
And there's a
That'd
bit
be
of
funny.
a standoff and vague confusion. And then this conversation begins throughout the book with you, about you. More generally, why was that an interesting freedom or place for you to live in this book, talking to yourself and multiplying yourself?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've always been interested in persona, right? Like, so like Prelude to Bruise, like Boy is a persona. He's an avatar that I created to kind of help me have some distance and work out these ideas that were relevant to me but weren't necessarily my personal experiences. And then you write a memoir, and then people come up to you at events and they're like, I feel like I know you. I did. Sorry, I should not be laughing. This is mad laughter. I did a book event in 2019, and it was like for students, and it was great. They were great. Students are always awesome, honestly. And then it's the fucking adults. And then afterwards, the coordinator, I'm like getting my stuff in the green room, and she's like, "Oh, that was so wonderful. That was so great." And she's like, "And your mother?" And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And she was like, "I just want to be your mother." Thank you so much. Bye. Like, I literally grabbed my back. You know, so like, which is to say, like, I've created this piece of art that obviously is about me and everything, but like, people get real familiar really quickly, and you're like, why would you say that? You know, I don't need him. Also, I don't need another mom. What? And so, you know, you develop this relationship to yourself. You know, there is a self that's an object on the page, and people have an intense relationship that isn't invalid. I've read books, and you're just like, like Sula Peace, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I know her like an auntie, you know what I mean? And she never existed, much less being a memoir character. So I think just thinking about all of that and the desire for multiplicity, which I think is interesting, just as a wish, wouldn't it be nice, to like be able to create armies of us. Looking around, I think we're good people here. Wouldn't it be nice if there were more of us to take on what the fuck is going on out there? Wouldn't that be awesome? That's a sincere wish, and so yeah, and then people do ask weird questions. So in that case, I decided, so someone asked, so here's the thing. I've noticed that in praise of Black writers' work, I've noticed that the language tends to be very intense compared to white. It's like white writers like genius and transcendent and da-da-da. Black writers, and I wrote a book called Prelude to Bruise. But Black writers, it's like raw, brutal, searing. Like I'm like, these are all acts of violence. Like, did the book beat you up? You know what I mean? Can your essay layman come to your living room and whoop your ass? Or did he write a good essay collection? You know? Kind of weird. Think about it, right? Like when you and it's honestly, it was like kind of a failed poem. I was like, what if I could like create a found poem, but I just couldn't figure out, you know, how to do it. But it stayed with me. So the fictional side in the story that's laced throughout the book, he's at a reading and someone asked, do you think you need your pain in order to write? And so then he gets home and his pain's waiting for him for a conversation. And we'll leave it there.
Of all the places where you have discovered and played in the writing of this collection, what are you most curious to pursue?
The humor. I love being mischievous and productively inappropriate. I think that's you know what I mean? It's like, I think of, who's it? Nafisa Thompson Spires wrote like Heads of the Colored People, and she writes a lot about humor and fiction, and she's like, you don't want to enact discursive violence, you know, like that's not my desire. But I was like, is a motorcycle literally coming in? Perfect. No, but I think humor, I just think it's interesting, it's complicated, and the reason I love poetry more than anything is that poems are wonderful traps. Like people get caught up in the beauty and the rhythm and the cadence, and then you can like, wow, you know? Okay, now I'm like, why do people call my book serious? But you know what I mean? It's like you kind of lure people into an idea that maybe if it was like an essay or something, they go, that's too much for me right now. And I love that. And I think humor is it can be another version of that. So yeah, I think it's fun. I think it's wicked. Yeah.
I love the idea of poems being small caps.
Oh yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Cynthia.
When they work, they are.
Yeah. Cynthia Cruz, she came and she's a wonderful poet, and I took a class with her when I was in graduate school, and she was like, she either said monsters or demons, but monsters or demons made out of sound and image. And I love that. So like all the poems are like little critters. Like, bitch. Gremlins. Don't read it out loud, they get bigger. Okay.
Can we take a question?
Yeah.
Are there
I'll
any
be here.
burning curiosities or questions from 1 to 1.5 voices that might be curious? Any questions coming up, folks? Yeah.
I have a question about the poem All I Gotta Do Is Stay Black in Bed. The last line mentioned Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you were thinking about the body of her work or a specific piece that she wrote, because what came to mind for me was Beloved. There's a quote that says, anything dead coming back to life.
Hurts after it's like the one useful white person in all of Toni Morrison's book who shows up in El Sepa. Yeah, she has like hypothermia. It's literally, like, you know, it's canon. It's canon. White people are at best useless in Toni Morrison's book. Except for her. I think her name was Amy. Yeah, so I can read that poem. It's short. Yes. What I was thinking about, there was an interview, one of the last interviews Toni Morrison did for Fresh Air with Terry Gross. She was really candid, and she says at one point that it's clear she was a little bewildered. And if you read other interviews and texts and stuff like that, she talked to like Hilton Alice a lot towards the end of her life. She was not happy about being old. She didn't like it. It hurt. It was painful, and she's like, "Oh, my friends are past." Like she just sounded really fucking cranky, which actually aligns totally with Toni Morrison's professor. But I was interested in that. And then in the interview, you know, she just like admits like whatever, and Terry Gross asks her a question. And Toni Morrison laughs, which is why like humor in the book, you know, that like deep black laughter. And she's like, maybe I'm depressed. And I was like, oh shit! Oh my god! If Toni Morrison is like depressed and bewildered, what the fuck hope is there for the rest of it? So this is a short poem, and yeah, so to your point, this poem references definitely Beloved, several of the books. At 84 years old, Toni Morrison wonders if she's depressed. History begins to forget itself, and memory bruises me back into a burdened blue hour. My God, the ghosts don't come quietly anymore. Sweet headless laughter used to scent my kitchen. Every few moons I'd find my father made of tobacco smoke, his whisper a guitar strummed. A woman wrapped in white lace walked out of the water and waited patiently for her name. But these new ghosts march through me in mud-caked boots and smile without teeth. I tell them to clean up after themselves. And dead girls laugh and leave behind bloody blue eyes. So, she was going through it. And I just think we have to acknowledge that, like, first of all, like, we treat our elders like Google sometimes, but they're often just as bewildered, by what we're experiencing. And sometimes, we turn to artists like, please give us the answers. And I'm like, they probably want the answers too. Yeah, thank you for the question. That was a good question. What was that, the have question you were like?
Yeah, sure.
What's that? Okay.
Is there another question? Anyone burning?
Yeah, sure.
I know reading poems aloud really helps the poets understand my feelings and tones. I'm just really curious, you're reading so much emotional life. While you're reading, do you ever find, even post, like being published, do you ever find while reading a poem changes you, or if you change a poem, or if anything, whatever changes happen in you and with the book?
Oh, I love that. So she was asking, like, obviously, like, reading is an important part of this work. It's an oral tradition, but, like, in the reading, am I surprised or changed or impacted by the poems, even though I wrote them? Not a lot. Because I read the poems out loud as I'm writing them. So like Yusuf Komunyakaa says, like, the ear is a wonderful editor. So once a poem is not finished but like up and running, we've got more than like a stanza, I start reading it, to find the rhythm and to, so like the too much of you, too few of you, too you of you, like that's coming from me being like, oh, okay, I'm hearing something. And so by the time a book is, in your hands, I've read these poems a lot. I know them well. What I will say, I try to pay attention. I read the room as best I can. I think of every space as a specific moment in space that will never happen again. And so I guess maybe it's like for the next time. There's a poem in the book like Dead Dozens that's fucking wild. And I'm learning from audiences like how to work with that, So it's not necessarily that I'm like, oh, wow, but I'm more like, clearly I have, like, I'm pretty like blazing dead ahead and whatever. And I think the risk of my speed is sometimes is that I can leave you like, like I've moved on and you're like, wait, I need a fucking moment. Slow. Exactly. Slow down and whisper. So yeah, that's more it. Like me being like, oh, I think I moved on and I looked up and I saw someone in the audience blinking back to like that's not what I was trying to do. Yeah, I'm not trying to, I want to impact you. I want this to feel engaging. I want you to leave here like feeling these poems are now a part of you. I do not want you to feel overwhelmed, bewildered, because that's what's happening now. That's unproductive. Yeah, so I just try to pay attention to that. Thank you.
And in a way, that's a very beautiful moment to like send us out into the world on, I think.
Good luck.
If there is a greater reason to celebrate this book, I don't know what it is, right? Like our ability to be alive at the end of the world's plural, because it isn't the end of the world, is constantly happening all the fucking time. And the sooner we build up this muscle that helps us get smarter about how we love ourselves, all of ourselves, our past selves, our future selves, right, our histories,
Each other's selves.
the more equipped we're going to be to take on what's next. And I'm so grateful that this book is in the world, and I'm so grateful that you are writing toward your collective selves with such ferocity.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.